The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, and the Rabbinical Assembly. Today is the first day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 9th of Iyar, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Sunday, April 26th, 2026. We will read Parashat Emor this coming Shabbat, and it is the 24th day of the Omer. Let's begin. Me'am Loez on the Parsha. We'll start Parashat Emor today. Parashat Emor, for the most part, at least in the first half, I would say, of the Parsha, is all about special laws that have to do with the Kohanim, what have to do with the priests. You see, back when the Beit HaMikdash existed, and when the tabernacle existed, there were Kohanim, specially designated priests, who would serve in the Beit HaMikdash, and their role was really twofold. Number one was to actually do the sacrifices in this temple, is to actually do the avodah, or do the commanded work that was obligated to the Jewish people inside the Beit HaMikdash. And number two, they were obligated also to teach the Jewish people. They also acted as teachers as well, and teachers of Torah. Because of that, there are specific restrictions that the Kohanim need to uphold, that the Torah commands us in this chapter. Really, the most central of these ideas is that they cannot be in contact with the dead of their people, right? And so why, right? This is an interesting, strange thing, that they cannot be in contact with dead bodies, right? God forbid we wouldn't want the Kohanim to be sheltered and to not be in touch with the hard parts of life. So why does the Torah seem to command us here that Kohanim cannot be in contact amongst the dead? And also, I think, in general, many of us have a problem with the idea of Kohanim anyway, because the way you become a Kohen is not because you've gone to university or you've gotten a degree in a certain matter, or a meritocracy where you become a Kohen because you studied a lot or something like that. But rather it is dynastical, right? It goes from father to child all the way back to Aaron, the brother of Moshe. And so all Kohanim need to be children by blood of Aaron a Kohen. And that's why they become Kohanim. So I think this is very difficult for moderns, because we say to ourselves, the reason someone should be a leader is because they prove themselves, either through their understanding of the Torah, understanding of they have the knowledge, or they have the ability to do it, or something like that, not because of some family status. And I think this is where it's really important of what the Me'am Loez says here. What is the reason why the Kohanim need to attend to this special restriction not to be around dead bodies? Well, it seems to be the starting point, at least in what the Me'am Loez here says. It's because they do the service in the Beit HaMikdash. They brought the sacrifices of God. And if they are required to bring the sacrifices of Hashem and legislated to by the Torah, not because they're somehow better, or not because they're somehow, smarter than everybody else, but because they're obligated to, based on that as a causative, because they have to bring the sacrifices and work inside the Beit HaMikdash, and in doing so, represent the Jewish people to Hashem, and stand in this very unique and very holy place that is different than surrounding areas. They then need to have specific restrictions upon themselves so that they can serve in this unique role. It is not because of their status. It is not because they're somehow better than everyone else. It's because they do a unique job, and therefore they need to follow unique rules. Now, the rule that's put forward here is that they can't be in contact with a dead body. The reason is because in Judaism, in Torah thought, a dead body is thought of as avi avot hatuma, is the term that's often used, which is translated, at least in the most common translation of the Me'am Loez, and usually translated often this way, as a super category, or the mother or father category of all categories of impurity. So in some ways, right, what is being said here is that impurity really comes from a dead body, a dead human body. And a Kohen cannot be in contact with this, because they will then become impure by being in contact, ritually impure, and therefore they can't stand in this place to serve Hashem. Now, obviously, it's an interesting question of, well, why was this the category? And I can add my grains of rice to why, but in the end, the Torah doesn't specifically say why is it the dead body that gives the chief impurity to a Kohen and renders them so that they can't serve in the Beit HaMikdash. And in some ways, I just want to leave that question open right now and accept that it is what God has told us. But I just like to pause at this moment, and we'll continue on tomorrow discussing this idea. But to say that the status of a Kohen, the restrictions, the sacred restrictions that a Kohen needs to follow, do not become because a Kohen is better than anyone else, but rather because a Kohen has special mitzvot, special obligations based on who they were born to, that obligate them, right? A Kohen who does not want to serve in the Beit HaMikdash doesn't have a choice. They don't have a choice not to anymore, right? They have to. If the temple still existed, the Jewish governance would have to force Kohanim to be Kohanim, to act as Kohanim inside the Beit HaMikdash. And because they do this special service and they need to be inside the Beit HaMikdash, that's why these rules are followed, and that's why we treat them differently, because of the job they do, not their status, not because they're better than anyone else, but because of the job that they must do and they're commanded to do by God. Mishnah Torah. We're going to continue learning the foundations of the Torah. We're on chapter 5. We're going to start with halacha 4. In previous sessions in this unit here, while we've been studying chapter 5 here, we've been really discussing the laws of Jewish martyrdom. When is one obligated, according to the Torah, to sacrifice one's life for the sake of the Torah and for the sake of Judaism? We've already learned that, for the most part, we shouldn't be doing this, right? Unless for very special cases, we shouldn't be doing this, thank God. And the idea behind this is the Torah tells us to live by the mitzvot and not die by them. But we learn that there are 3 particular cardinal sins that whenever someone makes us try to do them on the pain of our lives, we must sacrifice our lives and not do this transgression. And those are specifically idolatry, bloodshed, and sexual sins. So these are very important. We also learned about some other ideas in previous episodes where if this is in public, if this is not in public, why the non-Jew is forcing you to do this. Is it for his own personal gain or to uproot you from the Torah? What is the reason for this? The 4th halacha goes into a very interesting direction, which is, okay, now the thing has happened, right? You have to sacrifice your life. Okay, now what? Right? Now what? What happens if you don't sacrifice your life, and what happens if you do? And so, first of all, if you're supposed to, in this case, transgress and not sacrifice your life, number one, if you do sacrifice your life instead because you want to, or because you think this is the right thing to do, you actually transgress a very, very intense transgression, and are held accountable actually for your life afterwards. We've spoken about that in previous episodes, right? In the case of where you actually do have to sanctify your life, well, and you do have to actually give up your life and not transgress. If you do this, then you actually sacrifice your life. It's called a Kiddush Hashem. You sanctify God's name in this world. And what that really means is show that God's name is powerful, that God's laws are true, that people hold by them, and it strengthens God as a sovereign. Because God as a sovereign is only true, anything as a sovereign is only true as into how much power it actually has over other people and other things. If it doesn't actually have power in the real world, then it's not really a king. And so we actually make God a sovereign by sacrificing our lives in this world to show that God is truly what's most important, and that's what sanctifies God's name. If we do this in public, meaning amongst 10 Jews, this is considered Kiddush Hashem B'Rabim in public, and so it's even a greater mitzvah, a greater good act. And some great heroes in our tradition, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, these are all characters from the book of Daniel, and Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues. We've read about many rabbis martyring themselves in the Torah in front of the Jewish people inside the Talmud. And these people obviously are held up to a higher standard. But I think that the most interesting case here is the person who now has to sacrifice their life and don't transgress, but instead actually transgresses and actually chooses to do the sin. So now you violated the Torah, right? You're obligated in this case. According to the Torah, you're obligated to sacrifice your life and transgress, but instead you've transgressed and not sacrificed your life. What do we do with this person? Well, we know it's a desecration of God's name, right? Because you're showing in either, especially if you do it in public, if it's Barabim, it's a desecration of God's name, which is one of the worst transgressions we could possibly do, is to desecrate God's name and show that God isn't really sovereign in this world. So that's pretty bad sort of metaphysical punishment, both violating a positive and negative commandment in the Torah to both sanctify God's name and not desecrate it. But interestingly enough, there is no earthly punishment for this person. There is usually in the case when you violate either a Torah commandment, and especially when it's in public and people see it, then there would be some kind of earthly punishment, either lashing or even the death penalty for violating a negative commandment in the Torah. They would be executed usually by the court if found guilty. But we even know that even if the person was forced to kill a person and did in order to preserve his own life, that person is not given earthly punishment. And I think that says a lot, is that, yes, we're going to have to deal with the metaphysical burden of being punished by, of not giving up our lives. And we're going to have to deal with the spiritual guilt of what that entails. We did violate a commandment in the Torah, a very challenging commandment, but we do have to deal with that psychologically. On the other hand, though, we aren't obligated as a human community to actually kill someone or punish someone for doing this, which I think shows us that in some real way, the Torah really does understand how hard this choice is and doesn't hold someone, at least in the earthly world, liable for this. We leave this to Hashem, who knows everything, right? And has all of the unique knowledge in the world. We'll leave it to him to do the punishment and to determine what should happen to this person. But as human beings in this world, we are not obligated to actually punish a person for this. And I think that really says a lot about how we look at martyrdom and how we look at this and understand this within the Jewish tradition. And lastly, the halacha here also says one of the major reasons for this is because the person was forced to transgress, right? They're being coerced to transgress. And a person cannot be punished for something, at least in an earthly court, for something that they've been forced to do. And since they've been forced to do this, they've been coerced in this way. They haven't done the transgression out of free will, and therefore they can't be held to an earthly punishment. The halacha ends here by saying something very beautiful. But don't use this to say, well, I'm forced to do this. I'm in this hard place. I'll just continue to be here. I can't observe the Torah because they're forcing me not to. The Torah does push us to say that we should leave. We should get out of there. We should try to get out of that place. If you can't practice your Judaism in a place, it's upon you to leave. And actually, you get the worst spiritual punishment, according to the Rambam here. He says he will be prevented from reaching the world to come and will descend to the lowest levels of Gehinnom, of hell, if we don't go and actually try to do something about this and actually find a place where a Makom Torah, a place of Torah where we can practice our Judaism. So we do have to take these things into our own hands and our own life into our own hands. We can't continue to sit in this situation for the long term, which I think is an important instruction to us as a Jewish community. Menorat HaMaor. We'll continue learning the introduction. We're going to get a passage today from the Menorat HaMaor that actually doesn't include any citations from the Talmud or Midrash, which is quite rare, but it's in some ways, I think when reading Menorat HaMaor and learning it, it's nice to sometimes hear the editorial voice from the author himself because it's so rare. And here we really see it. So he says here, therefore, seeing the laziness of people in studying the great works in which every matter is set forth in detail, and in searching after the agadot scattered throughout our Talmud and other midrashim, teachings sweet to the palate of those who toil them, able to awaken sleeping hearts, and bring them to take shelter under the wings of the Shekhinah. So this is a kind of weird sentence here. I have to pause in the middle of the sentence here. And he seems to say that people don't have the time, and either don't have the time or don't have the energy because they're working so hard or whatever it may be, for whatever reason. He actually doesn't even give a reason of why. I mean, this word atzlut is a kind of an ugly word, right? They're lazy. But I also think there are really good reasons. Of course, he doesn't see these reasons very good, but he sees the reality is that people don't have a lot of time. They're not looking to look into very complicated things and search the original works. So they need these compilations. They need something that's going to inspire them and be quick. You can open it up, you can find the topic you're looking for and kind of move on. And people need this. But I think it's really interesting the way he says that people need this. Number one, he says that people specifically need the agadot and the midrashim and the specific teachings that actually light up the heart, that inspire people, that enable them, that inspire them to come closer to Hashem and want the Torah. That he knows and he understands that if you just give people straight halacha of like what they're supposed to do, it's not actually enough. They need to be inspired. They're human beings. They need to be inspired to come closer to Hashem and, in his beautiful words, to take shelter under the wings of the Shekhinah, to take shelter under the wings of God. And that's what these agadot and midrashim are really designed to do, to inspire us, to help us get closer to Hashem. And then he actually says something very interesting. He says, this actually isn't the essence, right? The essence of the Torah is doing it, not being inspired to do it, but to actually do it, which I think is such an important instruction to us. Oftentimes in our modern world today, we're so happy just leaving things with, oh, I was inspired by that, or that was inspiring Torah. That's not the end, right? That's not the point of Torah, is to inspire us. The point of Torah is to instruct us so that we actually do something different in our lives. And if we're not actually doing something different in our lives and actually changing who we are, right, there really isn't, we're not doing something. So he's saying, the reason I'm only bringing Agadata here is because this is what people need. They need to be inspired to look further, to go deeper, to actually want to pursue the commandments. There actually is no shortcut in Judaism to just sitting down and learning the halacha and learning the laws of Judaism. They're complicated. They're not easy to understand, and they need work. And you need to sit down and do that work. But in order to do that work, you need to be inspired to do that work. And you need to, in his words, right, have a heart that wants to dwell in the wings of the Shekhinah. We need to circumcise our hearts in the language of the Torah that he uses here. So very, very important. And it's for that reason that he made this work that we can look into immediately and be inspired by these teachings. Now, I would say these teachings still need a lot of work. Like they're not teachings that you could just like, open the book and just like simply read it and be inspired. You need to immerse yourself in it a little bit and analyze the teachings. And that's what we'll hopefully do as part of this class. But I think that's also sort of what makes the work so great, is it's not didactic. It's not just telling you what you should think, but rather it's presenting teachings from our actual rabbis that with proper analysis and thought really can inspire us, really can wake us up, that it's all there for us, but we sort of have a set table to look into and to be inspired by. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions, and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.